Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into something, well, pretty critical unfolding in South Asia.
We are. It's the Indus Waters Treaty, IWT, between India and Pakistan.
Exactly. And the big news is India's recent suspension of this treaty, which has been around for decades. This follows that awful terror attack in Pahalgam. It's raised a lot of questions.
Definitely. So our mission here for you is to get a solid, quick grasp of what this treaty is all about, its complexities, and what the suspension really means.
I want to cut through the noise, yeah. Focus on the key stuff.
Right. We're pulling from the treaty text itself, analyses from places like the IUCN, the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, news reports, academic articles, a whole range.
The goal is clarity, maybe even uncovering a few surprising bits along the way.
So let's get started. This treaty, the IWT, it didn't just appear out of thin air. There's a history here.
Yeah, take us back. What led up to it?
Well, it really starts with the partition of India in 1947. Suddenly you have this huge integrated river system carved up by a new border.
Instantly creating problems, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Water disputes flared up almost immediately. There was a temporary agreement in 1948, the Inter-Dominion Agreement on Canal Water Dispute. But it was clear something more permanent was needed. It just wasn't sustainable.
A Band-Aid solution, basically. So that leads us to 1960 and the Indus Waters Treaty. What's the absolute core principle?
The core is the division of the rivers. The World Bank actually helped broker this.
How did they divide them?
Okay, so the three eastern rivers, that's the Beas, Ravi, and Sutlej, they were allocated pretty much exclusively to India. Their combined average flow is around 41 billion cubic meters a year.
And the Western rivers?
Those, the Indus, the Chenab, and the Hellam went to Pakistan. And these carry a lot more water, roughly 99 billion cubic meters annually on average.
Wow, okay, that's a significant difference. So if you look at the total water that actually originates in India, what did that split look like percentage-wise?
Yeah, in terms of the water within India's territory, India got control over about 30%, and Pakistan got rights to about 70%.
70%, that sounds tilted. Why was that?
Well, a lot of it is just geography, the natural flow of the system. Most of the water is in those western rivers that flow down towards Pakistan. But crucially, the treaty did allow India some uses of those western rivers.
Okay. What kind of uses?
Limited irrigation, for one, but more importantly, unlimited non-consumptive uses. Things like generating hydroelectric power, navigation, floating timber, fishing.
But with conditions, right?
Absolutely strict conditions attached, especially for hydropower. But yeah, this allocation, while geographically logical perhaps, sets up this inherent dynamic. Pakistan is downstream.
Dependent on rivers largely controlled upstream by India.
Exactly. So Pakistan's always had this background worry, this fear, especially when things get tense politically.
Fear of what specifically?
That India could, theoretically, manipulate the flows, engineer floods during monsoons or hold back water to create drought-like conditions downstream. It's a vulnerability.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so the treaty divides the water, but it sounds like there's a lot more to it. What are some of the really key operational parts of the agreement?
One huge one is how India can use those western rivers for hydropower. The treaty specifies run-of-the-river projects.
Run-of-the-river. Explain that.
It means India can build hydro projects, yes, but they have to adhere to really strict design criteria. They can't build massive storage dams that would let them significantly control or alter the river's natural flow timing.
So no holding back vast amounts of water. The idea is to let the river run, more or less, while generating power.
Precisely. The design can't give India the ability to, manipulate flows in a way that harms Pakistan's water rights downstream. It's a very technical part of the treaty annexures.
Okay. And what if Pakistan thinks India isn't following those rules? Or if any other disagreement comes up, is there a mechanism?
Yes, and it's vital. The treaty set up the Permanent Indus Commission, or PIC. Each country appoints a commissioner.
And their job is?
To maintain communication, cooperate, exchange data, and be the first stop for resolving any questions or issues that arise. They're meant to meet regularly, inspect sites.
But what if the commissioners disagree? They can't solve everything, surely.
True, and the treaty anticipates that. Article 9X lays out a tiered dispute resolution process.
Tiered? How so?
So first, simple questions go to the commission. If they deadlock, the issue becomes a difference.
A difference, okay.
And those differences, particularly technical ones, can be referred to a neutral expert. That process is detailed in Annexure F. It's meant to be a sort of independent technical assessment.
And if it's bigger than just a technical difference, like about how the treaty itself should be interpreted?
Then it escalates to a dispute. And for disputes, Annexure G kicks in. This allows for resolution through negotiation, potentially mediation, or as a last resort, a formal court of arbitration.
So a clear ladder for escalation. Seems pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
What else is built in?
Data sharing is key. Article 6 mandates it. Both sides have to provide monthly river flow data.
Monthly. Is that enough?
Well, the treaty also says if one country needs specific data for, say, managing their own systems, they can request it more frequently, even daily, if necessary, for operational needs.
Transparency, then. Seems crucial for trust, or trying to build it. And how long does this treaty last? Can it be changed or scrapped?
Article 12 says it came into effect April 1st, 1960. And it remains in force unless both India and Pakistan agree to terminate it through a new, duly ratified treaty. Modification also requires mutual agreement.
Okay, requires mutual agreement. That's important. Now, despite these mechanisms, there has been friction, right?
Yeah.
Pakistan objecting to Indian projects.
Oh, definitely. That's been a recurring theme. Pakistan has raised objections to several Indian hydro projects on the western rivers.
Like which ones?
The Kishanganga project on the Shalom River tributary and the Rattle project on the Chenab. These are probably the most prominent recent examples. Pakistan argues their designs violate the treaty's technical specifications, potentially affecting flows downstream.
Has any dispute gone all the way through that resolution process?
Yes, the Blar Dam project, also on the Chenab, is a major case study. Pakistan had serious concerns about its design and potential impact on water flow.
And what happened?
That one did go to a neutral expert appointed by the World Bank. In 2007, the expert delivered a verdict. It was somewhat mixed, actually.
How so?
Well, the expert largely okayed the dam's general design, but did uphold some of Pakistan's specific technical objections. Things related to the height of the turbine intakes and the positioning of spillway gates, referencing specific clauses like paragraph 8 of Annexure D.
Interesting. So the mechanism worked, in a sense, even if the outcome wasn't a total win for either side. Any other long-running disagreements?
There's the Wular Barrage on the Jhelum, which India calls the Tobal Navigation Project. Pakistan has objected to that since way back in 1987.
What's the issue there?
India proposed it to improve navigation during lean seasons below Wular Lake. Pakistan objects, saying it constitutes storage beyond what the treaty permits and could affect their downstream uses. The project's been stalled for decades because of this disagreement.
So these examples really show the different viewpoints, don't they?
Absolutely. Pakistan often frames these infrastructure projects as India potentially seeking what they sometimes call hydrohegemony.
Hydrohegemony, meaning using water control for leverage.
Essentially, yeah. The fear that India, as the upstream power, could use water infrastructure not just for its own needs, but as a strategic tool. India, of course, strongly refutes this, maintaining its projects are fully compliant with the treaty and necessary for its own development, and often points to things like climate change for reduced flows.
Which brings us right up to the present. This suspension by India, what was the exact trigger?
The immediate catalyst cited by India was the terror attack in Pahalgam on April 23, 2025. India's government announced an indefinite suspension of the IWT just days later.
And they linked it directly.
Explicitly. The statement mentioned cross-border linkages to the attack as the reason for suspending the treaty.
What conditions did India set for lifting the suspension? Is there a way back?
India stated the suspension would remain until Pakistan takes, and these are the key words, credible and irrevocable steps to stop supporting cross-border
A
terrorism.
very high bar, it sounds like.
It's directly tying the treaty's operation to India's core national security concerns regarding terrorism.
And India didn't just stop at the treaty, did they?
Hmm.
There were other measures announced simultaneously.
No, it was a package of measures. They closed the Atari-Wagah border crossing immediately. They canceled SARC visa exemption scheme visas for Pakistani nationals, telling those in India they had 48 hours to leave.
Wow. Diplomatic relations, too.
Significant downgrading. Both countries reduced staff levels at their high commissions in Islamabad and New Delhi. And both withdrew their respective defense advisors. Pakistan reciprocated that move.
So a major diplomatic fallout alongside the treaty suspension. How did Pakistan react specifically to the IWT suspension?
Vehemently. Pakistan condemned it strongly. They've called it an act of water warfare, even suggesting it might be a false flag operation to distract from other issues.
And their legal argument.
They argue it's a blatant violation of international law, and specifically Article 12 of the IWT, which, as we discussed, requires mutual consent for termination or modification. Unilateral suspension isn't provided for in the treaty text itself.
What are the biggest worries inside Pakistan now, with the treaty suspended? What could actually happen?
The immediate concerns are huge. Their agriculture is heavily dependent on Indus system water. Major cities rely on it for drinking water, and a significant chunk of their electricity comes from hydropower on these rivers.
So the uncertainty itself is damaging.
Exactly. The suspension creates massive uncertainty about future water availability, amplifying those long-standing fears we talked about regarding potential flow manipulation by India.
What about the World Bank? They brokered the treaty. Have they weighed in? And what did this do to that whole dispute resolution system?
Well, the World Bank has historically played a mediating role, yes. It's worth noting, though, that Article 7, Paragraph 3 specifically separates the IWT itself from the Indus Basin Development Fund Agreement, which was about financing early infrastructure. They're legally distinct.
Okay.
But India's suspension throws the treaty's own mechanisms, the Commission, the neutral expert, the Court of Arbitration under Article 9X and Annexures F and G into complete limbo. If one party declares the treaty suspended, how can you use its procedures? It fundamentally undermines that entire framework.
It really puts the whole thing on ice. Despite all this, looking back, the treaty has survived a lot, hasn't it?
It really has. That's perhaps the most remarkable thing. Think about it. Multiple wars between India and Pakistan, countless crises, decades of tension, yet the IWT held.
It's often credited with preventing water itself from becoming a cause of war.
Widely credited, yes. Its resilience for over 60 years speaks volumes, probably about the perceived mutual necessity, however strained, and maybe the robustness of those communication channels like the PIC, even when other diplomacy failed.
But the context is changing now, isn't it? Climate change is a big factor looming over the Indus Basin.
A huge factor. Organizations like the IUCN have pointed this out. They've noted, for instance, a slight downward trend in the Chenab River's flows over recent decades.
Lower flows overall.
And also, critically, increased variability. More frequent and severe droughts are being observed in the basin, and the causes are complex. It could be changing precipitation. Upstream storage by India plays a role, according to Pakistan, but the larger impact of climate change on glaciers and monsoon patterns is undeniable.
Making water management even harder for both countries.
Incredibly challenging. And this uncertainty exists regardless of the treaty's status, really. It just adds another layer of stress to an already stressed system.
Did the IUCN report suggest any ways forward beyond just highlighting the problems?
It did. It pushed for quite a significant shift in thinking, moving away from just dividing the water towards managing it as a shared resource, maybe even a commodity.
A shared resource? How would that work?
Well, one idea they floated was setting up a joint basin-wide organization with both India and Pakistan involved for integrated development and sustainable management.
That sounds ambitious given the current climate.
Extremely ambitious. It would require a massive leap in trust and cooperation. The report stressed that India, being the upper riparian, kind of needs to show more congeniality, as they put it. But it also suggested Pakistan needs to strengthen its own institutions, like it's part of the Indus Water Commission.
Were there ever other cooperative ideas on the table, maybe more technical ones?
Over the years, some big ideas have been floated, though none gained real traction. Things like India potentially diverting some of its unused Eastern River water towards its own dry regions, like Kutch, maybe even routing it through Pakistan with some benefit-sharing agreement.
Wow, through Pakistan.
Yeah, or concepts like interlinking rivers within India, maybe diverting some Chenab water towards the eastern rivers. These are massive engineering and political challenges, of course, but they represent a different way of thinking cooperation for mutual water security.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We have this treaty, the IWT, incredibly important historically for keeping the peace over water, at least.
Right, a cornerstone, despite flaws and tensions.
Now facing maybe its biggest challenge ever with India's suspension, linking it directly to terrorism and wider geopolitical issues.
Exactly. The suspension isn't just about water. It's deeply tangled up in the broader security relationship, or lack thereof.
So hopefully you listening now have a clearer picture. The treaty's basics, how it's supposed to work, the ongoing arguments like over hydro projects, and what this suspension really signifies.
It's complex, no doubt. But understanding those core elements is crucial to following what happens next. Significant consequences hang in the balance for millions of people.
And that leaves us with our final thought for you to mull over. Considering how deeply water, security, and the stability of the entire region are linked, what possible paths forward could exist? What kind of innovative, maybe even unexpected ways might navigate this incredibly tense situation to ensure the long-term future for everyone dependent on the Indus Basin?
A huge question with no easy answers, something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.